standing with some of the brightest minds in this country. These are undergrad students that have become part of the top 20 finalists in the Old Mutual and Nedbank budget speech competition. What exactly have you submitted? What exactly were you asked to do?
Okay, so the competition basically posits a question on some macro or microeconomic topic every year, and we have to write an essay around it. This year we had to write, for the undergraduate category, about an argument for investing in South Africa and against investing in South Africa.
I feel like to actually limit spending on like government spending, to actually and then redirect that kind of those resources towards investment education, and actually empowering more, I guess, what we can say like entrepreneurship towards the country, to actually encourage more employment opportunities towards the youth.
Over half of our youth are currently unemployed in this country. In terms of addressing the issue, I think that what we need is a greater matching between the skills that are demanded by firms in South Africa and those that are provided by the youth. We are seeing a problem of overcrowding at universities currently. Students are every year demanding cheaper or free education, and we find that the fiscus can't provide for it. So I think that free education, at least in the short term, is not going to be feasible.
Usually there's a term thrown around that the future is in our hands, and I feel like that as young people we are more responsible for what the last or the other generation has left behind. Right, so we've coming from an economy of like state capture and some level of corruption in there, and it is up to us that the economy that they left for us is in bad shape, and it's up to us to actually fix it.
And on that note, we want to say hello, Dumelang, Sanbonani, South Africa. A very warm welcome to Expressions. If you don't know this by now, this is definitely the place for you to air your views. We have a very special broadcast. We're coming to you in Cape Town from the Desmond Tutu Foundation. I'm your host, Jacqueline Mapala.
And I'm your host, Mkolisiwa Masango. This is your number one youth current affairs show, Expressions. Now we're coming to you straight out of Cape Town. Now this is off the heels of the 2020 budget speech. We're going to be speaking to young people, Jackie, essentially just a debrief to find out from them, does it really get a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Remember, we're not live this evening, but we do welcome you to please participate in this all-important discussion in all our social media platforms.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, this is our analysis of the budget 2020 that was delivered by Minister Tito Mboweni. Now, we had an opportunity, obviously, to speak to young people, because everything about this budget, or at least our interpretation as Expressions, is about being able to find out what young people have to say about at least or the things that they're anticipating from the budget 2020. And this is what young people had to say about it. So we are literally standing outside of the gates of Parliament, and we are counting down to the budget speech 2020 that is going to be delivered by Minister Tito Mboweni. I just want to know, how are you feeling? I mean, what is going through your minds right now?
I'm very excited. I'm hoping to hear more about VAT. I mean, the big question here is, are we going to see an increase in VAT today? And are we going to see more kind of taxes being introduced, like the export tax on scrap metals?
VAT is going to be on the cards for sure. Also what the budget deficit is, but just to be here is a complete honor.
I'm just looking forward to see how the budget will be tabled. Probably changes around VAT, but I honestly think it's going to be just another budget, because even last year we thought it was going to be the biggest budget, but it was just another non-event.
I think especially for young people, given the high unemployment rate within the youth, I think it's quite important for them they tune in and have an opinions, and then it matters to them.
So those were some of the comments coming from young people in terms of what they were anticipating to hear from the minister in terms of the budget. Now, to help me unpack this very important issue of the budget 2020 from the perspectives of young people, I'm joined in my makeshift studio by Uzama Pumalo, who is from the World Economic Forum Global Shaper, and she represents the Tswani hub there. And I'm also joined by Matifaza Binguza, the undergrad winner of the Old Mutual and Nedbank budget speech competition. And I'm also joined by Begi Temba, who is the postgrad winner of the Old Mutual and Nedbank budget speech competition. And I'm also joined by Lucy Radebe, who is the economics analyst from Nedbank, right? Ladies and one gentleman, welcome to Expressions.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you here. Okay, so I think maybe let me start with you, Big Tim. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of what the minister tabled? I think especially related to youth issues. I mean, do you feel that the budget spoke to the challenges that young people are facing?
I think the government is failing to address some barriers to entry in the labor market. One of them being that no one will hire you in South Africa if you don't have experience. So, yes, it's good to invest in the establishment of a new university, but at the end of the day, when that student graduates, is that student going to get the job? I think that to me constitute a barrier to entry, because it prevents this person from entering the labor market. It prevents this person from participating in economic activity. So I think the key issue is really around things like training of unskilled youth and more opportunities for training graduates. Because I myself have been in university for 7 years. I have 3 qualifications. One of them is a cum laude, but not even once has a potential employer come to my class and say, look, we want 5 students, we're going to train these students, and look, we're going to prepare them for the workplace. So I think that's the key issue that the government should be addressing.
Matifazo, I want to bring you into the conversation. I mean, also, congratulations, I think, to both of you from on behalf of Expressions. I mean, you're definitely a shining beacon when it comes to youth talent in this country. I want to find out from you, in terms of your submission, as a winner, at least representing the undergrad category, what did you say specifically around some of the issues that you think might be important to young people?
Okay, well, basically my essay was really based around the importance of institutions. And institutions are basically just rules that we as a society come up with to govern our economy effectively. And I was just mentioning that it's really important that we make sure that these institutions are strong, because when they're strong, then we can increase investment, which will lead to economic growth. And at the end of the day, economic growth is what will help us fix all these issues that we're starting to see, especially unemployment. If we can get economic growth to increase, then we'll see our youth unemployment come down, and we'll start to feel a little bit less pressure in that regard. When I'm speaking to a lot of my peers, it's definitely a concern as you start to get to that stage when you're going to graduate. You're wondering, how long is it going to take me to get a job? Will I get a job? It's a big concern.
As an economist, and obviously having have listened to the budget speech from the minister, in terms of young people, I mean, what is your take in terms of how he's tabled challenges and issues facing young people in this country?
I mean, I think we had a lot of that actually come out from the State of the Nation, not so much in the budget. I think the biggest thing, is our youth unemployment rate. We've got the highest one in the world. So we've got more than half of our youth sitting at home. They're at the prime of their lives. They should be doing all sorts of interesting things, and they're not doing those things. So I don't know if the finance minister could have done something big in that sense, because if you look at sort of the public sector and any job initiatives that come from the public sector, they're actually going to be very, very small. The private sector is sort of the ones that need to actually be creating those jobs. So what you want to see, what I wanted to have seen, was sort of the Minister of Finance say, we're dividing up our money this way, and this money is going to create an enabling environment for the private sector to actually hire those youth. Then I wanted another minister to stand up and say, and these are the rules. We're going to force, because we're spending our money now on learning and culture, we're training these young people, but on the other hand, they need to get a job. So we're going to have legislation in place to say every company, you need to hire so many people. So Becky Temba, you don't actually need 5 years experience for a job that's going to pay you like R1,000 a month. We're actually going to take you in and say, you know what, we are willing to train you, and they must put the laws in place.
Yeah.
So government must create that enabling environment so that the private sector can.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that enabling environment has not been created.
The increase in what he's sort of put into social grants could have been used better, maybe around, I don't know, whether it's youth entrepreneurship initiatives, for instance, or empowering the youth somehow. I mean, why are we allocating, this increase towards social grants when we haven't even started speaking about how we're going to empower the youth in this country?
So I think both are quite important. And if anything, when you look at the social grant figures as they already are, in terms of how much a single recipient would receive, they are fundamentally small, right? And oftentimes you'll find that they do provide some relief for people from low-income families or who simply do not have financial means to get by. So I don't think that we should eliminate that increase. It's a much-needed increase, especially when you look at the fact that the cost of goods do go up, transport does go up. So people who make use of social grants try to stretch it as much as possible. If anything, we need a government that's able to hold different issues and prioritize different issues effectively. You shouldn't have to concentrate on just one at the expense of the other.
Well, Katie, that's all we have for you for this particular segment, so make sure you stay with us. We'll be back after this and go on the flip side of this.
This is your number one youth current affairs show. Oh, well, we're not live this evening, but of course we're speaking to young people about the budget speech of 2020, just wanting to find out what they thought about it. Did it get a thumbs up from them or a thumbs down? We just want to find out from them, could the minister have said some things to put their minds at ease? I know you had a very important point to make with the increase that we are going to be seeing for social grants. Please stand up and make your point for us.
Budget speech was not what we expected because they didn't really focus on the things they're supposed to be focusing on. Besides the grants, like employment, the leadership, learners, and all that.
So you feel other areas could have been more prioritized over social grants? It's a very, interesting view that you're making, and it's also, just treading on controversial grounds as well. Because I know Nabila, joining us right now on the panel as well, you also made some interesting calculations as far as social grants are concerned. Can you please just, put us into your headspace and engage us on some of those calculations that you made and what your concerns were about the increase that we're going to be having in social grants?
You get about 440 each month for the social grant, and if the government could take 50 Rand each month and just put that away in a trust fund, then that could actually be saved, and for the year, by taking 50 Rand each month, that adds up to 600 Rand for a year, which is not much. But if you add it up for 18 years, it adds up to about 10,800 Rand, which is not much, but it's a kickstart to your career, because not everyone has money to study. And then that money that's put away in a trust fund by the government can actually be taken by the students and used to start studying and paying their fees for that.
Oh, wow. All right. And I see some young people clapping here as well in the audience. Now, sir, I'm going to please ask you to also stand up for us and speak to us about the point that you also wanted to raise about the budget speech.
I think what got a thumbs up for me in the speech was the issue of tax adjustments, because the minister said they won't be raising value-added tax and things like personal income tax and all other taxes that affect individuals. So I think that was a thumbs up for me. But what got a thumbs down was the fact that more than 8 million people, young people who are between the ages of 15 and 30 something, I think, are unemployed or out of school. But the minister didn't have a tangible plan on how to solve that or how much is being allocated to solve that.
Talk to us about some of your suggestions.
Not suggestions so much, but just thoughts. So we are on the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution, and the minister spoke of how he was going to allocate some of the budget towards introducing coding and robotics for learners in grade R to 3, which makes sense to me because obviously that was a response to research by Oxford and UNESCO that projects that 60% of the jobs we have today will not exist in the next decade or two. So that's a thumbs up for me, but the question would be, what does it mean to be putting money into coding and robotics when we have such low literacy rates in primary schools? So there's a question around, are we really getting people ready to take on high complexity jobs if we are not succeeding at kind of giving them the basic skills in education?
So I know you also had a point that you wanted to raise. Please stand up for us and speak to us.
Okay, thank you. You spoke about creating a sovereign wealth fund. I think for me personally, I would give it a thumbs up. Even though right now South Africa's economy is not in a very good state, because normally a sovereign fund is funded by a budget surplus. But I think it's just good for him to dwell on the thought and just put it out there that this is something that would definitely benefit youth in the future. Maybe like 10 or 15 or 20 years later. I think it's something that we need to start focusing on now, rather than later.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, all right, Mbogeli, of course, you heard from the young people there on the floor. And remember that we're not live this evening, but we do, of course, encourage you to partake in this all-important discussion on all our social media platforms. Jackie's on standby to wrap this up when we return. Kelene Expressions, stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching Expressions, and this is our post-budget analysis from the perspective of young people in this country. And of course, we're still coming to you from the premises of the Desmond Tutu Foundation. Now, obviously, we need to wrap this conversation up, but I think I need to officially and formally introduce my new panelists, at least my addition to my panelists. I'm joined by Uluvo Bayi as well as Nabila Africa, and they're both students here in Cape Town. So it's very important for us, I think, as Expressions, just to make sure that we're reflecting the views of young people on the ground. So officially, welcome to Expressions.
Thank you.
I want to find out from you, as we wrap this conversation up, what in your opinion is the way forward, especially when we're talking about the challenges that young people are facing in South Africa?
Yeah, okay, the last point I will raise is the issue of small business enterprise. Our government can put in money to those sectors, and where young enterprise who are qualified, they can be able to create their own ideas and businesses so that employment can be created through that. And once there's an employment, the standard of living can be fine-tuned.
And for you, Nabila?
So I'll be touching on his point as well, because I'm basically paying for my own studies, no bursary whatsoever. So the government needs to create more jobs, because then what's the use? I'm paying for my own studies, working so hard, if I know I'm not going to get a job the moment I'm done studying. So that's it.
And for you, Zama, I mean, the minister has delivered his 2020 budget speech with relations to just the issues, the challenges that young people are facing. What kind of 2020 should young people look to at least be experiencing?
I think one of the big things is we all know that for the most part, government's responsibility isn't to create jobs, which is always odd that politicians tend to say will create 3 million jobs or 5 million jobs. What government is supposed to do is create an enabling environment for growth to happen, and so that those opportunities for young people or even older people, for them to be able to access jobs. So I think government needs to be more bullish in creating that enabling environment, and make sure that some of the plans that they communicate, and certainly from this budget, are implemented. Then the sentiment from different corners of the country was that this was a relatively balanced budget, but it also didn't give a lot of detail into certain things. So now more than ever, we're essentially looking for more detail. I think the second thing, and I mean, one of the audience members even mentioned it, it's great that we're looking at having a new higher institution of learning for robotics and AI, but when your literacy levels are at the dismal rate that South Africa's literacy levels are, and also just our understanding of just simple mathematics, you'll find that you're not going to grasp AI and robotics as well. So we need to understand the barriers that we currently have and come up with solutions for that. Because if you can't do simple maths, you're certainly not going to do AI and robotics well.
Representing Nedbank, being an economist at Nedbank, How important is the role of corporate in making sure that we change the trajectory of youth unemployment in this country?
I mean, corporates have one of the biggest roles. So when it comes to job creations, they're the ones that can create the bulk of jobs out there. If we look at something like the Yes Initiative, Nedbank is one of the biggest partners. I mean, we've taken on with our partners 3,000 students. So that's quite a lot of students that we've taken on. But I mean, to wrap up, as I was listening to the students speak, my main thing was, oh my word, we need to think bigger than this. So Naveen, I loved your idea of the trust fund, but 10,000 something at the end of 12 years for you to go to university is too little. You must actually think bigger than that, and that's the bigger sort of problem with what's coming out from government. The youth should agitate more. So we cannot say, oh my word, we've got an unemployment rate of 29.1%, a youth unemployment rate of over 50%, and then we are happy that out of my 440, that's not a lot of money, that I'm going to save 50 bucks for me somehow in the future to be able to have 10,000 Rand. I think you need to agitate more, and you need to ask, why are jobs not being created so that I don't even have to take 50 Rand every single month. I can just go to university and it is going to be paid for me if I cannot afford it. That's what we need to agitate for all the time and not be satisfied with that little.
What kind of future is the youth of South Africa facing in terms of what has been tabled in the budget?
I mean, if I look at their future, it's not so much the role of budget, because all the budget tells us is, I've got 10 Rand that I got in, and this is how I'm dividing my 10 Rand. So I need other ministers to say, actually, to come up. The Minister of Education to tell me that this is what I have for the youth and this is how I'm going to train them up. Then I want trade and industry to say, you know what, we're going to start up new businesses and this is how it's going to impact the youth. So far from this budget, just from the dry budget, the future does not look that great. But if I have sort of other ministers and if I have the youth actually going and saying, I'm holding you accountable, then the future is bright. But we need the agitation from the youth, because nobody is going to do it for you. At this point, you need to stand up and say, you know what, Minister of Education, this is the training we want to see. We shouldn't be having social grants of 440. We shouldn't be increasing old age pensions by 80 Rand. I mean, what can you do really with 80 Rand? So they must agitate for it, because no one's going to do it, because we don't have the jobs to do it. So we have to actually hold those in power accountable. I sat in a room once, and as we were discussing things with the sort of a petrochemicals giant, a lady stood up and said, the future is not in this room. And I thought, oh my word, she's right. It was a whole bunch of sort of us sort of, you know, old people sitting in the room, but we needed the voice of the youth, and they need to speak up. And if they do, then their future is bright.
Absolutely. I don't think I could have concluded that any better. A very big thank you for coming to the show. I think you've definitely given us a lot of insight, a lot of food for thought. I think especially around what young people can do and how they can actually participate in seeing the changes that they want to see. So thank you very, very much. Nko, do you think we got a thumbs up from the youth in terms of the budget?
Well, they did give us their views. You heard Naomi's, and Expressions has done it again to give the voice of the youth an authentic expression, you know, in the budget speech of 2020. Guys, once again, as the audience, please give yourselves a big round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us. Lugeli Naola Kitaya, we thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you so much for your participation in Gudlian Zetu Zokumana. We see all your comments there. Thank you so much for joining us from all of us at Expressions.
Thank you for watching. Adios, muchachos. Bye.